Welcome everyone. Let me know if you can hear me. Welcome to this week's Qdabra webinar. My name is Jennifer Lindsay. I am an InfoPath developer and project manager here at Qdabra. And this week we are going to be giving you a special sneak preview of one of our new software products under development called the Qdabra FormsViewer. And this is part of our eForms Innovations Initiative, providing you additional products and software and tools to allow you to get more out of your eForms experience than you can with just using the native InfoPath application. Can you all hear me fine? I hope so. Okay, great. Thanks a lot, guys. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Qdabra, we are a consulting and software company focusing on SharePoint, InfoPath, and eForm solutions in general. We have a community-driven website called InfoPathDev.com. It's an active forum. It contains blogs. It's a place where you can post questions if you have a problem or some sort of an issue that you've run into in your own form development. We'll provide free support on that forum. If you have a larger problem or something a little more complicated than can be answered in a forum question, we have support packages that are available on our website, Qdabra.com. And if you need even more help, we can actually build solutions for you. We do consulting work for hire. We have 3 of the world's InfoPath MVPs on staff and a number of other people, including myself, who have a lot of experience in InfoPath development as well as SharePoint development. And if you need for us to do a larger problem, solve a larger problem for you or build a larger solution, we can certainly do that and send you a quote. Okay, let's get started with this week's webinar, which should be on the shorter side of things. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, what we're demoing this week is part of our new Qdabra eForms Innovations push. We're going beyond SharePoint, beyond InfoPath. There are 4 prongs to this particular innovation approach. Last week, for last week's webinar, you got to see a demo of our Site Scanner app, which falls under the Assess category. It basically scans your site to see where all of your InfoPath forms are, what content types are available, how many forms are in each library, whether or not you have forms in a list. In essence, something that you can't just see by examining, say, the site contents area of your SharePoint site. This week we'll be going over Maintain, how you can keep using your InfoPath forms without using InfoPath. And last week we also looked at the Qdabra Forms services, which falls under the Extend category. It allows you to extract data and even attachments and images from your forms without having to manually open up the forms and download those attachments or that data yourself. It automatically exports it to libraries and lists on your SharePoint site. And we'll also be looking at, I believe in next week's webinar, perhaps the week after that, migrating your data away from SharePoint entirely using a cloud-based version of our DBXL app that's hosted in Azure. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about? We're talking about FormsViewer, and this is actually more than just a viewer. This is an application that sits on your Office 365 site. It allows you to quickly and easily open, edit, and submit browser-based XML forms. In essence, this does exactly the same thing that the InfoPath browser-based form viewer allows you to do. It has a support for a wide range of browser-based controls, the same controls that InfoPath supports in the browser. This app easily installs on your Office 365 site. You install it simply by going to All Site Contents and then click on the Add an App button. I'll go ahead and show you that. It's not based on ASP.NET. InfoPath is very much built and runs in an ASP.NET environment. Our solution runs entirely in HTML and JavaScript, which are obviously web-based languages. They're optimized, so our app is more optimized for loading faster and better viewable in the browser environment. And the best thing about it is that this will be completely free and open source. We are expecting to do beta testing in early 2014, and it will probably be, the app will probably be released sometime during the first half of 2014. So why develop an alternative to InfoPath's browser capabilities? Well, first thing is that it's free. You don't actually have to buy the InfoPath application in order to view your forms. Ultimately, it will be faster than InfoPath's browser-based capabilities, and that's because, as I said on the previous slide, we're ditching the ASP.NET environment. We're going entirely in HTML and JavaScript, and since those are web-based, web-oriented languages, we can get better optimization and better performance out of our application than you can get with InfoPath. It's open source, which basically means that anyone can participate in the development of the application. Obviously, we here at Qdabra are going to be developing the first version, version 1.0, but after then, the source code will be completely open source. You can download it, examine it. If you are a developer yourself and you know JavaScript, you've done HTML, CSS development before, you can actually participate in the development and direct the future direction of the application. Also, with open source, you generally have more frequent releases, so you don't have to necessarily wait several years to get the additional features that you've been asking for. And also, if you're participating, you're more likely that your voice will be heard and the features you're asking for will get into the next release. This is particularly true of software products that are backed by small companies like Qdabra. Certainly Microsoft is more concerned with putting out the next version of SharePoint or Access or some of their bigger budget software products, more so than with InfoPath. So with open source, backed by a small company, you're more likely to get your voice heard and your features are more likely to get into the next release, and that release is likely to happen sooner. But ultimately, the reason for doing this is to give you, the end user, flexibility so that you're not locked into a single solution for developing XML-based browser forms. Okay, that's enough talking. Let's take a quick look at one of the forms that I have here. And this particular form I have loaded in the FormsViewer app. You can tell that because it's up here in the top left corner. I know this looks almost identical to the experience that you would get with an InfoPath form in the browser. And in fact, I have this very same form opened up using the InfoPath browser services. You'll see that here. You may notice that it's difficult to tell the difference between the two. That is definitely on purpose. We have attempted to mimic the user experience, or the good parts of the user experience of the InfoPath browser form, and we are rendering things almost identically to the way that they are rendered in InfoPath browser. You'll see there's some small differences in the color and the point size of the lines that border the fields is slightly different, but our focus is less on making it look 100% identical to the way that it's rendered in InfoPath, and focusing more, at least for this first release, on capturing the essence of the look and feel of the browser-based form experience and also the functionality. We have support for a wide range of controls. We have support for text-based controls. We have support for date pickers, and we've built in what I think is a nicer date picker than what you find in InfoPath. I can pick a wide range of dates. I can change this date here to the 17th, and you'll see that it goes back to the traditional month, day, year format once I've tabbed out or clicked outside of the field. This is virtually identical to what you would get. I will tell you when I switch back and forth between the two because they look virtually identical. This is now the InfoPath form, and you'll see that when I open up the date picker, not as nice a date picker format, so we tried to improve on that experience a little bit. Okay, back into the Forms viewer. Down below here, we have also replicated the this repeating table here. I've actually already filled out a couple of the fields. We have support for drop-down lists as well. You'll see that this looks virtually identical to the drop-down list on the InfoPath form. And we also have support for inserting into repeating tables. So I can insert a third row here if I like, and you'll see that third row just appeared down here. We also have support for rules and default value calculations. Let's see if I change the value. I think I'm on the GIFs one right now. These fields are replicated down below, as well as additional fields that pertain to this particular itemized expense line. So if I change this value, let's change it to 123. And if I tab out of that field, you'll see that we have a rule sitting down here on this amount field that basically copies its value from this particular field, this cost field up here. So we have support for rule calculations. You'll see that the total expenses also updated here. If I change the cash advance field to, let's see, 25 instead, and tab out of there, you'll see that this is updated. Down here, this section is based on which particular row is currently being focused on in the itemized expenses repeating table. If I switch rows, right now we're on this second row with gifts. If I switch rows, you'll see that this amount down here changed to 120. So we're now looking at the information for the top row here. If I click this button down here, so you notice we also have button support as well. So these are rule buttons that determine the information that appears down here. We have that support built in as well, and we've now switched to this new third row. And again, if I typed in a description, and it looks like we found our first bug. The descriptions field should have been copied down here just the same way that the, oh, you know why it didn't work? I typed it into the wrong row. So let me cut and paste that down here. And now you'll see it copies down. So the form was working correctly. That was my own mistake. So this is just a very quick look at our ability to basically replicate this stock InfoPath form. And we're now looking at the InfoPath version. You'll see that there are still a couple of controls missing. We have the ability to insert and delete rows, but right now there is no, oh, this is another date picker control that I just tabbed into. Right now we don't have the ability to delete or insert additional rows in between as you would normally see on an InfoPath form, this little control here. That is on our list of features to implement next, as well as the submit feature as well. There will be we will eventually have the ability to submit forms to InfoPath library. That feature is currently under development and will definitely make it into our beta release of early next year. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. Let me pop this out. So, Michelle asks, we've heard rumors about the deprecation of InfoPath from Microsoft. What does that mean? So we've heard these rumors as well. We don't have any additional information at this point about those rumors. Deprecation would basically mean that if Microsoft chose to deprecate InfoPath, that would mean that they would no longer be putting out new releases of InfoPath. So you wouldn't see, you know, an InfoPath 2014, 2015, anything like that. They would, however, most likely continue to support existing versions of InfoPath up through InfoPath 2013, which just came out this past year. But there would most likely not be any new releases of InfoPath in the future. So that would mean, for example, that the current feature set of InfoPath in 2013, those are all the features you would ever get. Whatever bugs currently exist out there, one known bug is that if you have a browser-based form and you try to apply a filter to a repeating section or a repeating table, InfoPath will complain if you try to publish that form as a browser-based form. It'll complain and say that you can only open it in InfoPath Filler. So, I mean, bugs like that are most likely not going to get fixed because there will be no new releases if Microsoft chooses to deprecate InfoPath. So, and yeah, we've heard these rumors too, and Qdabra has intended to release a competing product for a number of years now, and now that the rumors are really starting to swirl, that's one of the reasons why we chose to dive into the actual creation of this FormsViewer app this year, because we figured that it's about time that someone started addressing some of the issues that people have had with InfoPath and provide an alternative to InfoPath as well. That was a very long-winded answer to your question, Michelle. Are there any other questions about what you've seen today? I hope the feedback is positive so far. I know it doesn't seem like much now that I'm actually running through the demo, but as one of the developers on the project, I know that a lot of work has gone into this, and we're all very excited to see this come to fruition. All of our hard work is finally coming together, and we're excited for the beta testing that will be happening sometime early next year. Okay, well, before I leave you for today, I did say this was going to be a short webinar. I would like to mention that usually if you attend the webinar, we give you the webinar slides and also any demo forums that are available, that are shown during the webinar. However, since this is a beta application that's currently under development, there will be no associated forms or materials that you will receive for this particular webinar. However, feel free to browse the other webinars that we have given over the past year. And if you've missed the webinar, it's just $29 to get all of the forms and the materials that were demoed. And for $199 annually, you get access to as many of the webinars that are given that are currently posted in our webinar store. Okay, we have one more question. Donald asks, is the viewer only for viewing existing forms or to replace InfoPath for the development of forms? The viewer is only for existing forms. So you would still need InfoPath Designer in order to develop. However, you would no longer need the filler form. We're going to be attempting to build as many filler features as possible into the browser base so that InfoPath Filler will no longer be needed to fill out forms. And this does reduce your dependency on InfoPath, especially if you have InfoPath Filler or you have a sandboxed form that you have trouble getting sandbox services to run on your SharePoint site. You would no longer need those in order to have your users fill out the forms. However, you'd still need Designer for now. And Donald also asks, what will be replacing InfoPath for additional development? That's a good question. Depending on the success of our FormsViewer application, we are also considering developing our own XML form designer, which would obviously be a direct competitor to the InfoPath Designer application. That's currently in very early stages of discussion, and a lot will depend on, like I said, how widely adopted our FormsViewer is, and also whether or not our customers and our user community is demanding an alternative to InfoPath Designer. So if you want an alternative to that, Donald, make sure that your voice is heard. Definitely send us feedback along those lines. Okay, folks, that's all I had for today. Please send us your feedback if you're interested in being one of our beta testers. We have not yet finalized a beta test date, and as I've said a couple of times in today's webinar, that will be sometime probably in the first quarter of 2014. Definitely mention that in your feedback, which will be a form that will pop up as soon as the webinar ends. And mention that you're interested in participating in the demo version, and also any other feedback you may have on what you've seen today. We're very interested in what you think about this very first demo of the unfinished FormsViewer app. You guys are the privileged users, the privileged community to take the very first peek at this application, and we would love to know what you think about it. And as I also mentioned, there will be no presentation slides or demo templates passed out for today because this is, again, a special webinar giving you a sneak peek at our upcoming applications for 2014. All right, thank you very much. If there are any additional questions, I can answer them now. Otherwise, have a great day, and thank you very much for attending the Qdabra webinar.